Have you ever been waiting for a phone call that never comes? Have you ever felt forgotten by the people who should remember you most? This is a story about a Thanksgiving meal, but not one filled with family and laughter. It's a story about a woman who flew across the country for a meal she was never meant to be a part of. They said they wanted me there. They swore that the day wouldn't be the same without me. Fly out, Grandma, they said. We want you here for Thanksgiving. So I did. I packed my pie dish, my favorite sweater, and every bit of hope I had left. Then I waited. I was standing at the arrivals area of the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. My suitcase was next to me, and my coat was folded over my arm. People all around were hugging, crying, and holding signs. They were all being met by someone, but I stood there alone, like a misplaced package. The flight had landed over 40 minutes ago. I had checked the text from my daughter-in-law 3 times. It said, "We'll be there. The kids can't wait to see you," and had a heart emoji. I had replied, "Flight lands at 3:10. Can't wait to hug everyone." I never got an answer. I kept my coat folded because it was warm inside. I didn't sit down because I felt that if I did, I would be giving up. I didn't want to look like a woman who had been forgotten. Then my phone buzzed. It wasn't a call or a text. It was a notification from a social media app. My heart beat faster. I opened the app, and there they were. All of them. My son, Greg, in a blue sweater I had sent him last year. His wife, Meline, smiling and looking tan. The kids, Elliot and Ruby, were gathered around a table with a turkey and other food. There was a pie, but it wasn't mine. They were all raising their glasses in a toast. The message below the photo said, "Full house, full hearts. Happy Thanksgiving from our family to yours." I looked at the picture again. There was no mistake. There was no room for me at that table. I didn't cry. Not then. I just turned around, put on my coat, and started walking out of the terminal, past the taxis and the shuttle signs. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I wouldn't be waiting for them to remember me. 3 days before my flight, Greg had called me. That should have been a sign. My son doesn't usually call unless it's for a birthday, a bill, or a specific reason. But this time, his voice was very sweet and happy. "Hey, Mom," he said, "what are you doing for Thanksgiving?" I told him I planned to stay home, cook a small chicken, maybe bake a pie, and watch an old movie. "Nothing special," I said. "Just me and the radio." He paused for a moment, as if he were thinking about something. "Well," he said, "the kids were asking about you. We thought maybe you'd like to come here this year. Everyone will be together. It wouldn't feel right without you." That last part, "it wouldn't feel right without you," made me feel special. It had been a long time since I felt truly wanted. I was needed, yes, and people depended on me, but I hadn't felt wanted in years. There is a big difference. So I said yes. I said I would find a flight. Greg didn't offer to book it for me or pay me back, and I didn't ask. I still had an envelope of Christmas money I had saved for emergencies. I thought this was an emergency. After we hung up, I stared at the phone. I tried to remember the last time I had felt excited. Not worried or anxious or like I had to do something, but truly excited. It had been years since someone had invited me without asking me for something in return. I booked the ticket that evening, a direct flight that was on sale. I even paid a little extra to choose a seat with more legroom. It was a small thing, but I thought if I was going to travel so far, I might as well be a little comfortable. The next day, I went shopping, not just for gifts, even though I did buy 2 books for the kids and some special chocolates Meline used to like. No, I also bought something for myself. A new sweater, navy blue and made of soft wool. It was the kind of sweater that made you feel like you belonged in a family photo. 2. I packed 3 days early. I checked the weather in Minneapolis, set my heating to low, and took out the trash. I didn't tell my friends that I was leaving. They would ask too many questions. And a part of me didn't want to ruin the feeling. It had been so long since someone said, "Come, we want you here." I flew out on Thanksgiving morning. The airport was crowded with people carrying bags, wearing headphones, and holding pillows shaped like animals. I smiled at a baby across the aisle and shared a knowing look with another older woman who was reading a book. Both of us sat with our hands in our laps, both with untold stories. When the plane landed, I smoothed my skirt and brushed some food crumbs off my lap. I had worn my good shoes, the black ones with a small heel. I wanted to look like the kind of woman you invite to Thanksgiving. I believed I was that person until I wasn't. The walk from the baggage claim to the exit felt longer than usual. Maybe it was the weight of the suitcase, or maybe it was the weight of something else. I rolled my bag past the coffee shops, past the families hugging, past the young woman crying with happiness into her boyfriend's shoulder. I didn't feel angry then, just out of place. It was like someone had stopped me while the rest of the world kept moving. Outside, the sky was gray. It was that kind of dull light that makes the air feel heavy. My phone was still quiet. No texts, no missed calls. I checked the time again. It was 3:54 p.m. Thanksgiving dinner probably wouldn't start until 5 or 6. Maybe they were busy. Maybe the kids were wild, or the turkey needed to be cooked more. There were many reasons, and they were all harmless. But even harmless reasons hurt when you are standing alone at an airport. I waited on the curb for another 20 minutes, and my knees began to hurt. I sat on a bench and watched strangers get into cars that knew their names. I watched a woman with a big jacket bring her mother-in-law a hot chocolate and a hug. That hug, short and real, made me feel a deep ache in my chest. At some point, I tried to call. Greg didn't pick up. I left a message. I said I had landed, that I was at the usual pickup spot, and that I would wait a little longer. But I already knew. I knew before I opened the app again, before the photo loaded, before I saw the cranberry sauce and the long wooden table, and the message about full hearts. It wasn't the first time I had been forgotten, but it was the first time I had let myself admit that's what it was. I stood up, dusted off my coat, and pulled my suitcase behind me. No taxi, no rideshare, just me and the sidewalk. A man pushing a baby carriage offered a tired smile. I nodded back. It's funny how in airports, you can sometimes feel more seen by strangers than by your own family. It was almost 5 p.m. by then. The air was getting colder, the kind of cold that gets under your collar and asks, "What now?" I didn't answer. I just kept walking. My shoes were not made for walking on so much pavement, but I didn't stop. After about half a mile, I saw a small building with a bright neon sign that said, "Tina's Diner." The light flickered. The windows were steamy from the warmth inside. Someone had taped paper turkeys to the glass. I went in. The bell above the door jingled. Inside, the diner smelled like cooked food and cinnamon. It had old seats and a counter with cracked stools. There were maybe 6 people inside, a man in a delivery uniform, an older couple eating in silence, and a waitress with a short ponytail who looked up when I entered and said, "Happy Thanksgiving, honey." "Same to you," I said, surprised at how steady my voice was. I chose a booth by the window and sat down. The seat was warm and the table was clean. I took off my coat. "The kitchen is slow today," the waitress said as she gave me a menu. "But we have turkey and pie." "Pie sounds good," I said. "What kind?" She smiled. "Pumpkin, pecan, or key lime?" "Pumpkin and some tea, please." "You got it." I looked out the window while I waited. My suitcase sat beside me like a quiet dog. My phone, face down on the table, buzzed once. I didn't turn it over. The pie arrived. It was warm with a little whipped cream. The tea was strong and a little bitter, just how I like it. I took a bite, then another. It was the best piece of pie I had eaten in years. Maybe not because of the taste, but because for once I hadn't made it for anyone else. I ate slowly. I didn't rush. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't wait for anyone to show up and tell me it was all a mistake. They weren't coming. Not today. Maybe not ever. And still, there I was, whole, breathing, sitting in a booth with paper turkeys on the window, letting the warmth return to my fingers. When the waitress brought the bill, she asked, "Want another slice to go?" I thought for a moment. Then I nodded. Yes, for later. She winked. "Best decision you'll make all day." I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because she was right. The air felt colder as I stepped back outside. The small white bag with my second slice of pie was in one hand, and my suitcase rolled behind me. I didn't have a plan. I hadn't booked a hotel, and no one was waiting for me. But somehow, I didn't feel lost. There is a kind of peace that comes when you finally stop expecting the people who hurt you to fix things. The wind picked up as I walked. It wasn't far to the nearest cheap hotel. I had seen the sign while walking from the airport. Valley Inn, weekly rates available. It was a small, low building with beige paint and a vending machine by the front door. But the lights were on, and right now, that was enough. Inside the lobby, a man behind the desk was watching a football game on a small TV. He looked up when I entered, his face bored. "Need a room?" he asked. "Yes, just for one night." I said, "A single." I looked down at myself. My good shoes were dirty from the walk. My sweater smelled a little like the airplane. I nodded. "A single." He gave me a form to fill out. ID and a credit card. I gave them to him. While he typed, I looked at the TV. A team in red and gold was losing badly. The man didn't seem to care. "Room 114, he said, giving me a key on a thin ring. "End of the row." I thanked him and rolled my suitcase down the sidewalk. The room was what I expected. 2 lamps with different lampshades, a bedspread with a dull pattern, and a TV that was older than my children. But it was warm. It had a heater that worked and a surprisingly clean bathroom. I took off my shoes and sat on the edge of the bed. My feet hurt. My back hurt more. But my heart, the part that should have been broken, felt surprisingly okay. I stared at my phone for a long time before turning it over. 3 missed calls from Greg, 2 from Meline, and a single text. "Mom, where are you?" No apology, no reason, just confusion. As if I was the one who had disappeared. As if I were the one who had forgotten to show up. I didn't reply. Instead, I unzipped my suitcase, took out my notebook, the one I use for grocery lists and thoughts I never say out loud, and wrote something on a new page. I am not spare. I am not extra. I am not a side dish at someone else's table. I stared at the sentence for a long time. Then I underlined it. I could have cried a year ago, 5 years ago. I would have. But tonight, the tears wouldn't come. What came instead was a strange clarity, like stepping into cold water. It was shocking, but it felt clean. It wasn't just about this dinner or the airport. It was about the years that came before it. The birthdays they forgot. The messages I left that were never answered. The last-minute invitations that always sounded like an obligation. Never a joy. I remembered Christmas 2 years ago when Meline called and said, "We'd love to have you over if it's not too much trouble getting here." That pause in her voice, the way she made it sound like she was doing me a favor. I remembered Greg's 40th birthday. I sent him a leather wallet with his initials on it. He sent a group text back that said, "Thanks for the gifts. Everyone. I remembered Ruby's school play. I found the live stream myself and watched it on my small laptop with a glass of wine and a lump in my throat. She didn't know I was watching. No one mentioned it. And still, I kept showing up. Until today. Maybe it takes standing alone on the curb in a different city to see what has been there all along. I wasn't a part of their life. I was an accessory, a convenience, a person they used when they needed to feel like good people. I looked around the motel room. Ugly, honest, useful. It was the most honest place I had been in years. I got up, made myself a cup of tea using the plastic coffee machine, and sat on the bed with my second slice of pie. No fancy plate, no linen napkin, just a white paper bag and a plastic fork. And yet, it tasted like something I had earned. The motel room's ceiling had a small crack that ran above the bed like a map. I stared at it while the heater made noises. Outside, I could hear the wind and the sound of cars from the highway. A man 2 rooms over was coughing. Somewhere, a toilet flushed. It wasn't a peaceful night, but it was an honest one. Around 2 a.m., I finally fell asleep. I slept in the clothes I had arrived in, too tired to change, too tired to unpack again. In the morning, I woke up before the sun. It's a habit I never lost. Even after I retired, my body insists on being awake by 6 in the morning. I made another cup of weak coffee from the machine in the room and watched the sky get light through the blinds. The pie was gone. The tea, too. But the quiet stayed. At 7:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Mom, I'm so sorry. There was a mix-up with the pickup. We thought your flight was tomorrow. Can you come to the house today? The kids really want to see you." It was from Greg. No reason for the photo. No mention of the dinner. No apology for posting a Thanksgiving without me in it. Just confusion and a question. I stared at the message, then set the phone down. I didn't answer. Instead, I got dressed, brushed my hair, and put on a little lipstick. It wasn't about seeing them. I wasn't going. It was about dignity, about reminding myself that I still got to decide how I presented myself to the world. Even if no one was looking. The lobby had a bowl of bruised apples and a coffee pot with coffee that tasted like burnt paper. I took an apple and put it in my bag. I checked out. The man behind the desk barely looked up from his football highlights. Outside, it was cold and clean. The wind had calmed down. The sky was a sharp, beautiful blue that only happens in November. I didn't go back to the airport right away. I walked. There was something I needed to do first. A mile down the road, between a gas station and a closed tire shop, was a small post office. I went inside and asked for an envelope and a pen. "Do you sell stamps?" I asked. "Of course," said the clerk. She was young and kind. "I need one for a letter to Massachusetts," I said. She gave it to me, and I wrote the address from memory. Emma Wexler, 12 Pond Hollow Lane, Worcester, Massachusetts, 01609. Emma was Greg's daughter from his first marriage, the only one who still called me just to talk. She was 23 now, finishing nursing school. She sent me pictures of her cat, told me when she passed exams, and asked for my recipe for cornbread stuffing. The envelope was empty for a moment. Then I took a page from my notebook and began writing. "Emma, dear, you once told me I was your safe place. I want you to know that hearing that meant more to me than most things in this world. This Thanksgiving didn't go as planned. I flew across the country for a table I was never meant to sit at, but I found something in the quiet that I didn't expect, room to remember who I am without waiting for someone else to say it first." I kept writing, not with anger or sadness, but with honesty. When I sealed the envelope, I felt lighter. At 10:35 a.m., I booked a ticket home. Same airline, same gate, but a different woman was boarding. The flight wasn't until evening, so I found a cafe with big windows and good scones. I sat there for hours with tea and a pen, thinking about things that had been unsaid for too long. I didn't write to Greg. I didn't call Meline. I didn't tell them where I was. They would see the missed call from the airline. Maybe they would wonder, maybe not. I wasn't angry. I was finished. Around 4 p.m., the light changed. It became a beautiful golden color that made even the parking lots look nice. I watched a little boy run toward a van, his backpack bouncing. He turned and waved at his grandmother, who was a little slower but smiling. She waved back, and he ran to her, grabbing her hand as if it were his lifeline. I watched them until they were gone, and I whispered to myself, not loudly, not with anger, but with a clear voice, I deserved that too. The plane home was only half full, which was a good thing. I had a whole row to myself. The seat by the window was cold when I sat down, and I left it that way. I didn't bother to fold my coat or put my seatbelt on right away. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to make myself neat for someone else's comfort. The flight attendant offered a soft smile. Heading home or leaving it? She asked as she gave me a plastic cup of water. Both, I said, in a way. She didn't ask more questions. She just nodded and moved on. That kind of quiet understanding is rare and kind. I stared out the window during takeoff, watching the gray city shrink beneath us. As the plane went higher, the sky became a wider blue, with nothing between me and it except the quiet sound of the engines and my own breathing. I thought I might feel sad again. I waited for it like you wait for a plane to hit a bumpy patch of air, but it didn't come. I didn't feel peaceful either. Not yet. But I did feel still, grounded, and present. That was new. Halfway through the flight, I took my phone from my bag and turned it on again. I told myself I was just checking the time, but of course, the notifications came flooding in. For texts from Greg, one voicemail. Mom, I'm really sorry. Please call me. The kids were asking where you were. Meline said she thought you knew we moved dinner up a day. Can we talk? I didn't open the voicemail. I didn't delete it either. I just let it sit. I let it wait, just as I had waited. I turned the phone off again. When we landed, it was already dark. My small city glowed in a way that was quiet and familiar. The shuttle driver who took me back to the parking lot was an older man with a happy look in his eye. He asked if I had been visiting family, and I smiled and said, not exactly. At home, my porch light was still on. I had left it on out of habit, as if I expected to return, tired and full and hugged by my family. Instead, I walked in with broken pieces in my bag and a mind that was clearer than it had been in years. My house smelled like lavender and old wood. The heater turned on with a comforting clank. I put down my suitcase and hung up my coat. I moved slowly, not because I was old, but because I was being deliberate. I made a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had hosted years of Thanksgivings. I looked around the room as if it belonged to a person I was still getting to know. Then I opened the drawer next to the fridge. That drawer, the one with the files, the one with folders for Greg, Emma, and legal. I took out Greg's folder. It was thick. It had receipts, copies of checks, printouts of tuition payments, a bill from a mechanic I had helped him pay when his car broke down, the agreement I had signed to help him with his house loan in 2010, and a receipt for a private school payment I had given for Ruby with a note in Meline's handwriting. We'll pay you back after the bonus hits. They never did. I turned each page carefully, not in anger or sadness, but with a new understanding. Then I reached for the thinner folder, labeled Emma. It had birthday cards, photos she had mailed me, a printout of her college graduation announcement, handwritten notes, a thank you note for helping her pay a course fee, and a postcard from Vermont. Wish you were here. Fall is wild and wonderful. I closed both folders and sat back. Then I reached for my notebook. And this time, I didn't write about my feelings. I wrote a plan. The next morning, I was at the bank before it even opened. There was a thin layer of ice on the steps, but I walked slowly and steadily, wearing my old boots and that same navy sweater. The sweater didn't match my scarf, but I no longer cared about how things looked. I cared about action. The teller, a young man with kind eyes and a nervous smile, greeted me politely. "Good morning, Mrs. Wexler. How can we help you today?" "I'd like to speak with someone about all of my accounts," I said. He nodded and called for a manager. A few minutes later, I was taken into a glass office with soft chairs and the faint smell of printer ink. A woman named Natalie introduced herself as my account manager. She looked like someone who did yoga and always had almonds in her purse. "What can I do for you today, Mrs. Wexler?" "I want to stop all automatic payments," I said. "Every single one of them, starting today." She blinked. "All of them?" "Yes." She typed on her computer, her eyebrows raising as she looked at the screen. "You have quite a few regular payments to family members, tuition payments, car insurance, and some donations to charities." "Keep the charities," I said. "Stop the rest." There was a long pause. "Do you want to talk about why?" she asked. I looked at her. To her credit, she didn't try to fill the silence with fake concern. "No," I said. "I've already spent enough time explaining myself." She nodded. "Understood." While she worked, I sat in the quiet office and watched the world outside. A mother was putting her child in a car seat. An older man was pushing a walker. A delivery truck was idling. "Done," Natalie finally said. "Everything has been stopped. I'll have the paperwork ready for you if you want to come back to sign tomorrow to cancel them completely." "I will." She hesitated. "There's also a power of attorney on file. Gregory Wexler. Do you still want him to have access?" My heartbeat didn't speed up. It just felt steady. "No," I said. "Cancel it." "Understood." She printed the form, and I signed it with a steady hand. By the time I left the bank, the ice had melted. I didn't rush. I stopped at a bakery, bought a fresh roll, and walked the long way home. It wasn't about punishing Greg. Not really. It was about drawing a line where I hadn't before. It was about realizing that love doesn't grow from sacrifice alone. It needs honesty. It needs truth. Back home, I took the pie dish from the sink, washed it gently, and put it away. Maybe someday I would make another pie. Maybe not. But I wouldn't make one for people who left me standing on a curb. That afternoon, I called my lawyer. Mr. Altman had handled our family's legal affairs for over 30 years. He had helped us buy the house, handle my husband's will, and even draft the first version of mine back in 2005. His voice was warm but cautious. "Mrs. Wexler, what can I do for you?" "I'd like to make changes to my will," I said, "and I want to set up a trust for Emma." "Yes," he said. He didn't ask why. He didn't have to. People like Mr. Altman have seen every kind of family disappointment. We set a time for the next day. When I hung up, I felt no triumph or victory, just clarity. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket and my tea. A few neighbors walked by. One waved, one didn't. The street was quiet, and I felt not healed, but steady. I felt like I had finally stopped knocking on a door that was never going to open. The next morning, the sky was soft and low, a pale winter gray. I dressed slowly, not because I was tired, but because I didn't want to rush what was coming next. At 9 a.m., I was in Mr. Altman's office, a small, two-story building with green shutters and a reception area that smelled of old paper. The same photos in gold frames hung on the walls, his children, his boat, his bulldog in a Santa hat. He stood when I entered, just as polite as he was 20 years ago. "Mrs. Wexler," he said, shaking my hand. "It's good to see you. And you, Mr. Altman." We sat in his office. The same leather chairs, the same ticking clock, the same stacks of forms on his desk. But now his reading glasses were thicker, and his mustache was completely white. "What are we changing today?" he asked gently. "My will," I said, "and I want to create a trust. Everything I own, every cent, every asset, I want it to be protected. And I want it to go to Emma. Only Emma." He didn't blink. He just nodded and took out a legal pad. "I assume we're removing Gregory and Meline." "Yes, they've had enough from me. More than enough." He looked up at that, but didn't say anything. "I want it to be unbreakable," I continued. "No loopholes. Emma is the only one who gets everything when I'm gone. And until then, she can use the trust for her education, a home, health care, or emergencies. I will be the one who decides what counts as an emergency." Altman smiled a little. "You've thought this through." "I have." "And your home, your retirement account, all of it, if it has your name on it, it moves to the trust." "Understood. And you want to keep full control while you are living?" "Of course." "Exactly." He leaned back. "Emma's a good girl. She always was." I felt a lump in my throat. "She's the only one who still sees me as a person, not a bank." Mr. Altman didn't react to the bitterness in my voice. "Then let's make sure your wishes are respected." For the next hour, we went through every item. He asked questions. I gave firm answers. No more uncertainty. No more second chances. When we were finished, he gathered the papers and looked at me with something close to respect. "I'll have the final draft ready in a few days," he said. "We'll get it notarized, and it'll be done." "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. Outside, the air was crisp. I walked home slowly, stopping once to buy a small red flower at the flower shop. I didn't decorate much anymore, but I wanted something bright on the kitchen table, something alive. The moment I stepped through the door, the phone rang. I didn't know the number, but I answered anyway. "Grandma." It was Emma. Her voice was excited and a little nervous. "I got your letter." I sat down at the kitchen table. "You did." I didn't know what happened. Dad and Meline said you canceled your flight at the last minute. They made it sound like you just changed your mind." "Of course they did," I said softly. "I was there. I landed. I waited. I saw the photos." Emma was quiet for a moment. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I had no idea." "I know, sweetheart. That's not on you. You didn't know. You're not the one who made that choice." She took a deep breath on the other end of the line. "I missed you so much that day. It didn't feel right without you." For the first time since the airport, tears came to my eyes. But they didn't fall. Not this time. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know." There was a silence between us. It wasn't awkward. It was full. "Grandma," she said finally, "can I come visit next weekend? I have a break from classes. I'll take the train." My heart felt warm and a little sad. "Of course," I said. "The guest room is ready." "I'll bring the chessboard," she said. "You still play?" I never stopped. We hung up a few minutes later. I sat there at the table, my hand still on the phone. For once, I didn't feel forgotten. I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. That Saturday, just after noon, I stood at the train station in my warmest coat, watching as passengers stepped off the train from Worcester. The platform smelled like gas and old rain. I was holding a paper bag with a sandwich and an apple just in case she had forgotten to eat. And then there she was. Emma came off the train wearing a big sweater and jeans, her dark curly hair under a hat, a worn cloth bag on her shoulder. She looked older than the last time I had seen her, somehow stronger. But when she saw me, her face lit up with something pure and unmistakable. She rushed over and hugged me like she meant it. It was that simple. No questions, no apologies, no tension in the air. Just her arms around me, tight and real. "Hi, Grandma," she whispered into my shoulder. "Hi, baby," I said. "You're here." We drove home in silence for a while. She watched the streets as if she were trying to remember them again. I drove, slowly, carefully, letting her take it all in. The neighborhood hadn't changed much, but it felt different with her beside me, back at the house. I made tea while she put her bag in the guest room. She came back with the familiar ease of someone who belonged, sitting on the corner of the couch, as if she had never left. The chessboard was on the coffee table. We played a game. She won. Then we played another. I won that one. Fair and square. Later, we sat at the kitchen table, both of us drinking tea. The red flower I had bought earlier that week was in the middle of the table, still red, still alive. "I read your letter again on the train," she said, tracing the rim of her mug. "I've never seen you write like that before." "I've never had to," I said. "I used to think being quiet was a good thing, but lately I think it's just made me easy to ignore." Emma looked up at me. "I never ignored you." "I know." She hesitated. "Dad doesn't know I'm here." "I figured. He called a couple of nights ago, asked if I'd seen you since Thanksgiving. I didn't lie. I just said we hadn't talked yet. That was kind." She shook her head. "It wasn't kindness. It was exhaustion. I'm tired of pretending things are normal." That surprised me. Emma had always been careful, a peacemaker in her broken family. Hearing her say that in a calm, steady voice told me she was becoming a strong woman. "You don't have to pretend here," I said. "Not ever." She nodded. "Neither do you." We sat in silence, just sipping our tea, and for the first time in weeks, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need Greg or Meline to say they were sorry or to make up another story about what went wrong. I didn't need a text or a voicemail or a late invitation. I had this. My house, my tea, my granddaughter. I had myself. That evening, Emma offered to make dinner. She cooked pasta with garlic and spinach, and I grated cheese while we talked about everything and nothing. We watched a silly movie afterward and laughed too hard at parts that weren't really that funny. Before bed, she sat beside me on the couch and said, "Grandma, I don't want to lose you." "You won't. Promise." "I can't promise forever," I said, "but I'm not going anywhere yet." She smiled, then hugged me again, more gently this time, but still real. After she went to sleep, I sat in the quiet of the living room, the clock ticking slowly. I looked at the pictures on the shelf. Some faces had faded. Some frames were empty now, but one picture was still there. Me holding Emma as a baby. My hair was darker then, my face softer, but my hands were just as steady around her tiny body. I looked at it for a long time. Then I got up, turned off the light, and went to bed. Emma left Sunday afternoon. We stayed on the porch for a while before her train. I gave her a container of leftover pasta, a scarf I had knitted last winter, and a quiet love that I didn't need to explain. She kissed my cheek and promised to call me Tuesday. Then she was gone. I stood there until the train was just a tiny dot. Then I went back inside. The house felt quieter than usual, but not in a lonely way. It was the kind of silence that comes after something important has been said, a silence that had meaning. I moved through the rooms slowly, picking up mugs, folding the blanket, and putting the chessboard back on the shelf. When I got to the kitchen, I opened the drawer again. The files were where I left them. Greg's folder was still thick with paper. Emma's was still thin. But it wasn't just about them anymore. It was about me. I took out a yellow notepad and began to list everything I had paid for over the last 15 years. Not just money I gave directly, but things I had quietly taken care of. Home repairs, medical costs, legal fees. When Greg left his first wife, the down payment for their second car, groceries when Meline was too tired to shop, school fundraisers I had been made to support with a check instead of a visit. I wrote it all down, line by line. By the time I finished, the list was 4 pages long. It was strange. I hadn't thought of myself as generous, just useful, reliable. Someone who helped, because that's what mothers do. But looking at the numbers, I saw it clearly. I had paid for their life. And in return, they gave me politeness. Empty birthday wishes, tired smiles, a chair near the coat rack when there was no room at the main table. I wasn't angry. Not really. I was just finished. At 3:17 p.m., my phone rang. Greg's name was on the screen. I didn't answer. A minute later, a voicemail, then a text. "Hi, Mom. Just checking in. Hope everything's okay. Let me know when you're free to talk." No urgency, no details, just a vague message, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't left me standing on the curb in another city while he carved turkey and took family photos I wasn't meant to see. I deleted the voicemail without listening. I left the text unread. That night, I lit a candle. It wasn't for a special occasion, just for the stillness, for the quiet of the house, and the way the light made the kitchen counter glow. I poured myself a glass of good wine, a bottle I had been saving for a real holiday. I set one place at the table, heated a bowl of leftover soup, and I sat, not looking at my phone, not waiting, not hoping for the phone to ring. I sat in my own life. Later, before bed, I opened my email. In the folder labeled Travel was the receipt for my Thanksgiving flight. Round trip return complete. I sent it to myself, and in the subject line I wrote, "Proof of departure and return. No rescue, no reunion, just me." I didn't send it to anyone else. I didn't need to. The next morning, I called Mr. Altman again. "I've been thinking," I told him. "I want to add a clause to the trust." "Of course," he said. "What are you thinking?" "I want Emma to be the only person in charge, but I also want a letter attached. Not a legal one, a personal one. You can include a statement of intent," he said. "It won't change the legal part, but it can explain your reasons." "Good. Then I'll write it." That same morning, I sat down and began to write. To whoever is reading this after I'm gone, if you're wondering why things were divided this way, let me say clearly this is not a punishment. It's honesty. I've spent my life giving quietly and consistently, but love without respect isn't love. Presence without care isn't family. I chose the one person who saw me before I disappeared. I didn't finish the letter that day. I didn't need to rush. Some things should be written slowly. Tuesday came and went without a call from Emma. Not because she forgot, but because we had agreed on it. She had classes that week and didn't want to be distracted. "I'll call Friday," she had said, "after my shift, same time." I trusted her. That morning, though, someone else did call. Meline. Her name lit up my phone like a warning. I let it ring. 30 seconds later, a text arrived. "Hi, Irene, hope you're well. Greg mentioned you've been hard to reach lately. Let's catch up soon." No periods or commas. No warmth. Catch up. We weren't old coworkers. We weren't neighbors. I had been her mother-in-law for almost 15 years. I had helped her get her first real job after Ruby was born. I had sent her baskets of food when she was sick. I had paid for her mother's funeral flowers when they couldn't afford them. Catch up. I put the phone down without replying. Later that afternoon, as if on cue, another message arrived. This one from Greg. "Mom, Meline tried calling. We're starting to get worried. Can you just let us know you're okay? The irony of it, they had left me at an airport, but now they were worried. Not when I was standing with my suitcase and no one to pick me up. Not when I was walking to a diner with frozen fingers. Not when they posted a photo that said everyone was together and there was no seat left for me. But now, when I was silent, they panicked. Silence is powerful. It makes people who are used to your voice, your giving, your yes feel uncomfortable. I kept the phone off for the rest of the day. That evening, I went through the attic, not for any dramatic reason, just to find an old recipe book Emma had once asked about, the one with my apple crisp recipe. I hadn't been up there in years. The boxes smelled of dust and old wood. In one box, I found the book, and beneath it, letters, dozens of them. Cards from Greg when he was a teenager. Drawings from Emma when she was a child. Thank you notes from friends and cousins who had moved away. A photo of my husband in his Sunday suit holding a pumpkin pie, as if it were a prize. I sat down on the floor and let the past rest in my lap. So many parts of myself I had put away to make room for others. I thought about Greg as a little boy, how he used to want to sleep with his head on my chest, because your heart is louder than the rain. How he would cry if I left for work too early. How I taught him to tie his shoes with 2 loops instead of 1, because it made more sense to him. I had loved him so completely once. Maybe I still did. But love doesn't excuse being forgotten. And forgiveness doesn't always mean things go back to how they were. I put the letters back carefully. I closed the box. And that night, when the house was dark and the world was quiet, I opened my notebook and added 2 more lines to the letter for the trust. I didn't want my final act to be polite. I wanted it to be clear. Emma, you saw me not because you had to, not for what I gave, but because you chose to. That's what family is. Choice, respect, truth. The pen felt heavier than usual in my hand, but I wrote anyway. The next day, I drove into town and went straight to the notary. It was in the back of a shipping store, past shelves of bubble wrap and cards. The man behind the counter, named Dev, had kind hands and a slow way of speaking. I need to notarize a letter, I said, showing him the pages I had written and some trust documents my lawyer had prepared. He glanced at the first page, then back at me. Big changes, he asked. I nodded. Long overdue ones. He didn't ask more questions. He just handed me a pen and helped me through each signature. When it was done, I felt lighter. Not free, not yet, but clearer, as if the road ahead had fewer turns. I stopped by the grocery store, picked up milk and oranges, and a bunch of flowers that were on sale. The kind of things you buy when life is steady again, when you're choosing your own piece of happiness, instead of waiting for someone else to give it to you. At home, I put the flowers in the vase near the kitchen sink. The smell of the flowers filled the house. I took off my coat, folded it, and laid it over the back of the chair. My phone buzzed just as I was putting the groceries away. Greg, again. Mom, we really need to talk. You're not answering, and it's making things worse. I don't know what's going on, but we're worried. Please call me. The message was longer than usual. The panic was starting to show, but there was still no real apology, no mention of what had happened, no taking responsibility, only my absence. And now, the worry it was causing him. He wasn't sorry for forgetting me. He was sorry I had stopped being there for him. I sat down, stared at the screen, then turned it off again. That afternoon, I took out the folders again. Greg's, Emma's, and the trust packet. I locked them all in my fireproof box and slid it back under the bed. Not because I was hiding anything, but because I was finished. Finished explaining, finished asking, finished waiting. I made soup that night. My hands still knew how to cook without thinking. I cooked for one, not for the absence of others. I set the table, not in sadness, but as a ritual, a sign of respect for myself. The soup was good. Later, I sat on the porch again, wrapped in a shawl, the air cool enough to feel like something was changing. And as the street lights came on, one by one, I remembered a moment I hadn't thought about in years. Greg was 10. He had come home from school with a cut lip and mud on his jeans. Another boy had pushed him. He didn't cry. He just stood at the sink, rinsing the blood off his hands, saying, "It's fine. It's nothing." I had knelt beside him and said, "You're allowed to be hurt. It doesn't make you weak." I wish someone had said that to me because I had been hurt quietly all the time for years, and I had let it happen because I thought being patient was a good thing. But it's not. Not always. Sometimes it's just a delay. Sometimes it's just the cost of silence. I sipped my tea slowly, letting the night come in. The flowers in the kitchen moved a little in a draft, a blur of purple in the dark. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. A car pulled into a driveway. Someone laughed. A sound from another life. And I sat in mine. No questions. No waiting, just the weight of my own belonging. Finally whole. It was late Friday afternoon when the knock came. I was folding laundry at the kitchen table, towels that were still warm from the dryer. I heard it. 3 slow knocks, not from the mailman, not a neighbor, but the kind of knock that shows a person is hesitant. I opened the door, and there she was, Meline. Her hair was too perfect. She wore shoes that were too narrow for our sidewalks and carried a bag on her shoulder. Her face had that look I had come to know, part concern, part act. "Irene," she said, her voice almost gentle. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer at first. I just stepped aside and let her in. She looked around as she entered, as if she expected to see a mess. The house looked the same, but something in the air had changed. I knew it, and I think she did, too. I led her to the living room. She didn't sit until I did. She placed her bag carefully at her feet and folded her hands in her lap. "I know you're upset," she began, her tone already practiced. "And I just want to say, this whole thing has been a huge misunderstanding." "Nothing," I said. She continued, "Greg thought your flight was Friday. That's what he told me. We didn't realize you had already landed." "And the photo?" I asked. She blinked. "What?" "The Thanksgiving photo. The message that said full house. All of you smiling at the table." She looked down. That was just something I posted for the holiday. I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did." She looked up again too quickly. "Well, yes, but I think we need to move past that now. The kids miss you. Greg's been calling. We're all just concerned. You've shut us out." I took a small breath. "No, I just stopped filling in the silence for you. That's different." Her mouth tightened. "I came here because we want to make things right." I looked at her, then, really looked at her, at the effort she put into her makeup, at the impatience hiding in her posture, at the avoidance she wore like perfume. "You didn't come to make things right," I said. "You came to see if I was still useful." She stood up straight. "That's not fair." "But it's true." She looked toward the hallway, as if Greg might appear and rescue her from this conversation. "I've given enough," I said calmly. "More than enough. And I've decided where the rest of it goes." That got her attention. Her eyes narrowed, just slightly. "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm not bitter. I'm simply finished." "Irene," she said, and now her voice was tighter, colder. "This isn't like you." "I know," I said. "It's like me now." There was a pause. She shifted in her seat. "Does Greg know you've made changes?" "I imagine he's starting to suspect." Her face fell. "And the house, your accounts, are they taken care of?" The silence after that was heavy. Finally, She reached for her bag and stood. "Well," she said, her tone now sharp, "I'm sorry you feel this way." I smiled just a little. "No, you're sorry I stopped accepting less than I deserved." She didn't reply. She just turned and walked to the door. At the doorway, she paused. "Greg really is worried." "He should be," I said. "Not because I'm gone, but because I'm not coming back." The door closed behind her with a soft click. I stood there for a long moment, my hand on the doorknob, the air still humming from the conversation. Then I went back to the kitchen, finished folding the towels, lit a candle, and made a cup of tea. The phone rang once that evening. Greg again. I let it ring, not because I was being mean, but because the silence finally belonged to me. Saturday came quietly. I woke up early, not because I had to, but because my body had found a new rhythm, one not controlled by expectations or someone else's schedule. The sky outside was pale and soft, the kind of morning that doesn't ask for anything. I took my tea to the porch and sat under the old blanket on the chair. The steam rose slowly from the cup. Down the street, a child shouted, followed by the sound of a skateboard. Winter was still holding back, but not for long. I thought about Meline's visit, not with regret or anger, just with curiosity, as if I were watching someone else remember a conversation they had never truly had. She hadn't come for peace. She came for control. And for the first time in a long time, I hadn't given it to her. That was the victory, not in winning or in being right, but in staying firm, in no longer acting polite just to make others comfortable. That afternoon, Emma called. Her voice was bright. "Hi, Grandma. I'm on break, but I wanted to check in. How's your week been?" "Eventful," I said, sipping my tea, "but steady." She heard the tone in my voice. "Something happened." "Meline stopped by." "Oh," she said. She and Greg wanted to make things right. "Did they?" "No," Emma breathed out. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." I wasn't surprised, but I wasn't shaken either. There was a pause on her end. Then she said quietly, "You sound different. Stronger." "I think I am." We talked for a while about her classes, a paper she was writing, and the cat who had knocked over her favorite lamp, the everyday things that make up real lives. When we hung up, I didn't feel that familiar ache of loneliness. I felt connected, present, full. Later, I spent the afternoon going through the drawers in the spare room. Not because I had to, but because I was ready to decide what mattered. I found a set of sheets I hadn't used in years. Emma might like those. I found a pair of earrings I had once saved for Ruby's 16th birthday, before I learned that gifts for me were often put away in drawers and forgotten. I held the earrings for a long time. Silver, simple, classic. I had bought them when Ruby was still a baby, imagining the moment she would stand in front of a mirror, putting them on before a school dance. But now they felt like symbols of something that was never mine to hold. I set them aside, not with anger, but with a sense of finality. That evening, I wrote in my notebook again. Not a letter this time, just a list. Things I no longer owed. Explanations. Second chances to people who waste first. Ones. Apologies for taking up space. A seat at a table that won't make room. Silence. And then next to it, I wrote another list. Things I still have. My name, my peace, my mind, my home, my granddaughter's voice in my ear, saying stronger. I tore the page out and folded it in half. I taped it to the back of the cabinet door under the sink, where only I would see it. A strange place for strength, but real. That night, I set the table for one again, but this time I lit 2 candles. Not because anyone else was coming, but because I was there fully. I sat down, ate my soup, and whispered, not for drama or pain, but because it needed to be said, "I'm still here." And I was. I spent the first Sunday of December decorating the porch. Nothing fancy, just a simple wreath with a red ribbon and 2 strings of lights. I didn't do it for my neighbors or for nostalgia. I did it because I wanted the house to shine for me, for once. Inside, I turned on the old radio and let the quiet jazz music fill the rooms. I used to decorate for the kids with stockings and cookies. But this year, there would be no stockings, no extra chairs, no waiting. This year, I lit the fire early and set one place for tea, my own. By the time the sun went down, the phone rang. It was Greg again. I answered this time. Mom. His voice was weaker than I remembered. I'm here, I said. My voice was calm and steady. There was a pause. I didn't think you would pick up. I know. Another pause. I saw the paperwork. He said, from the lawyer, the trust, the changes. I figured you would. He took a breath, as if he had expected a different tone. I don't understand. After everything. Exactly, I interrupted. After everything. He was quiet. You mean the money? He said finally. I mean the pattern. I replied. The forgetting, the late calls, the missing birthdays, the airport, the photo. That wasn't an accident. No, I said. It was worse. It was convenient. There it was. The truth, said out loud without apology. You're punishing us, he said, but it sounded less like a complaint and more like a hope that I would say no, that I would go back to being the old me. No, I said. I'm releasing myself from obligation, from old loyalties that only went one way, from the guilt I had carried for so long I had forgotten what it felt like to be light. I never thought it would come to this, he said quietly. I know. His voice broke. We're still your family. No, Greg, I was your family. You haven't been mine in a long time. And with that, we ended the call. Not with shouting, not with a resolution, but with a quiet truth that would echo for years. I hung up, stood at the window, and watched the street lamp flicker on. The next day, I mailed a small package to Emma. Inside, the silver earrings wrapped in soft cloth, a copy of the trust, and a note. These are yours. Not because you asked, but because you showed up. Wear them when you feel uncertain. You're never invisible in this house. Not then, not now, not ever. She called 3 days later, crying and laughing at the same time. Grandma, she said, her voice shaking. I don't know what to say. You already did. I said, the day you asked if you could come visit. The day you came without needing a reason. That night, I lit the fireplace and sat in its warmth. Outside, the street was quiet, covered with the first snow of the season. I watched it fall through the window, slow and clean. And I thought about all the Thanksgivings that had come before, the ones where I cooked through pain, the ones where I sat quietly, the ones I was invited to at the last minute. And then this one, the one I gave myself. No knives for carving, no tablecloths, no extra servings, just a walk, a diner, a slice of pie, and the clearest feeling I had ever tasted. Not bitterness, but freedom.